Well, last time Linda was on in October, she got a phone call from one of our listeners, and they gave her some incredible information. She'll report on that when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And George Norrie back with you on Coast to Coast with Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, tell us about this phone call you received from a Coast listener when you were on in October.
Right, you described it correctly. It was the caller who, listening to my Robert Salas report on the Minuteman missile interference by UFOs, called in and said that his father knew that the UFOs were capable of lifting up the concrete on the missile silos. And just for a little background, when the United States decided to build Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles and place them in underground silos around Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, and Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, one of the unsung heroes behind the scenes was a Boeing engineer named Alden Stockwell Cole. I feel like I've come to know this man in all the documents that his son has sent me since the last Coast radio broadcast. Alden Cole was born in 1922 and died in 1989. He fought with the U.S. Army in North Africa and Italy during World War II, and he earned 5 Bronze Stars for courage under fire. All of this, his military career, Boeing, and other documents you can see in my report at earthfiles.com. During his military years, the Army discovered that Alden Cole had a keen mind for technologies and that he was an excellent radar repairman. After his Army service, Alden Cole went to work for Boeing Airplane Company, checking in with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Headquarters, Air Materiel Command in Dayton, Ohio, for his, quote, prime secret W-33-038 security clearance. In 1946, Boeing started to study surface-to-air guided missiles and assigned Alden Cole's natural genius to the first Beaumark development. And then after the Beaumark came the Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles. And by the mid-1960s, Alden Cole had become a Boeing troubleshooter on the Minuteman underground in Wyoming, North Dakota, Montana. And the causes of a lot of Alden Cole's troubleshooting problems were UFOs. On October 25th, I posted my Earth Files interview and did a Coast broadcast with retired United States Air Force Captain Robert Salas about his dramatic experience at Malmstrom Air Force Base, where he was in the Oscar flight crew stationed 60 feet underground in a Minuteman missile bunker on March 24th, 1967, when 10 of the ICBMs shut down one at a time every second over a 10-second time period. Boeing said that was impossible. Above ground, the security alert team had phoned then First Lieutenant Salas to tell him that a large red glowing disk was hovering silently in the air above the missile silos. Alden Stockwell Cole at Boeing was in those missile sites in the 1960s, and he was also astonished by what UFOs could do to missile sites. Alden's son, Martin Cole, is the one who phoned me from his Whitefish, Montana home after my October 25th Earth Files and Coast reports. Martin said that he was born in September 1950, but by age 8, his parents had divorced. And when Martin reached teenage years, and around 15 in 1965, he spent that summer and a few following summers with his father at whatever air base Alden Cole was working. There, Martin listened as his father talked about lights in the sky that could not only start or stop missiles without any human involvement, but could lift off the heavy concrete lids atop the Minuteman missile silos and set them on the ground, much to the astonishment of all scientific and military personnel. Here now is Martin Cole from Whitefish, Montana.
He told me about the alarms that they'd had was because a missile silo had been breached and that the concrete covers that sit on top of the missiles that are moved when they get ready to launch were set off to one side, and that the radioactive material in the warhead was dead.
If I understand what you're saying, that thick concrete top that would have been over the missile silo was lifted up and put onto the side?
Correct. In other words, normally they have a track that they run on, and they have some sort of explosive device that moves them when they need to launch. And it wasn't moved on the tracks. It was actually picked up and set aside in the dirt. They had no idea. They had no clue how this happened. The guys that were the guards, the MPs and stuff up above were just in total shock. And, of course, there's a crew down in a bunker, and the crew down in the bunker was in shock.
Because this would not be considered possible to do, right?
No, we couldn't. Without cranes and stuff, you couldn't even do it today.
And did the security alert team that had been on the surface, had they seen anything unusual in the sky around the time that the tops of the missiles were moved off?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons my dad was sent out there. An alarm had been raised. My dad, he had to get down in the silo and check everything out.
And what else was it that he discovered about the radioactive material?
Well, he says that the material in the warhead was dead, like it had been drained. All the radioactivity was gone.
Well, what did he say was his conclusion and other Boeing engineers' perceptions about what had occurred at Warren Air Force Base, the Cheyenne site, to have allowed what seems impossible to have the heavy tops of the missile silos lifted off and put in the dirt, and to have had some kind of neutralization of the radioactive material?
Well, as far as what caused it, they all pretty much agreed that it was a UFO, and they were all, told not to say anything to anybody. There was no way any of that could have happened, and the way the electronics were fried in everything, there was no way that could have happened without somebody being very specific.
Did your dad describe to you what the UFOs were that people reported?
Yeah, he actually seen one when they were coming up on another site in the Dakotas that had a breach. And he said pretty much it was just a big glowing light. They couldn't get very close because nothing would work.
What wouldn't work?
The trucks and the cars and stuff that were headed out to the site just stopped working.
So your father, as a Boeing engineer trying to go out to find out what was happening at a missile silo, is in a truck with others, and the truck stops right on the road?
Yep.
What more details did he tell you?
He got out, and the MPs that he always traveled with just kind of stood there with their mouths open. And I guess there were some troops that jumped out of one of the other vehicles and started running towards the site, but they were a good quarter-mile away when this happened. And all my dad could do was just kind of stand there, and he said pretty soon the light just kind of took off, just poof, was gone. And all the lights and flashlights and everything came back on. So they started up their vehicles, hauled Bud in there, and he said they found the same thing. The concrete tops had been removed, and all the electronics inside was fried, and the nuclear material was dead.
And this would have been what year?
Around 67, 68.
And Bob Salas had his experience on March 24th, 1967, and there had been another breach. That was Malmstrom in Great Falls on the week before. And we know that there have been other reports in 66. There's been quite a few, actually, starting around the mid-60s. And this sounds like that your father was challenged with dealing with UFO interactions with ICBMs right from the beginning of the Minuteman installations.
Yeah, because the Minuteman installations was his baby. He was their head troubleshooter.
What did he say to you, his son, about his own perceptions of the technology that they were watching in the skies and had the ability to lift off that heavy concrete top, fry the electronics, and neutralize the radioactivity?
His idea was that they were not from this planet. His theory was that rather than using gases and chemicals and stuff like we used to get into space, they were using electromagnetism to push themselves or pull themselves from different places. And he came up with another theory, and he was talking about lasers and how lasers are photons that are focused through a crystal, either a ruby or a diamond or an emerald or something like that. And he had a theory that they were focusing some sort of electromagnetic energy through a metallic crystal of some sort. And he said that he believed that's how they were using their energy.
Did he suggest that the idea for a propulsion system of a laser through a metallic crystal might have come from his debriefings with military and intel agents?
I suspect that he came up with that idea not on his own, or that he had seen something that would be like that. Everything that he saw or did, it was all firsthand.
And I'm curious if he ever said that anyone working for any government agency or the Pentagon or any authority ever came to debrief any of the Boeing engineers about the non-human presence.
Oh, hell yes. There were several times, well, I guess every time, but there was a couple times, the two times I remember when he was gone for several days, he said part of the times he was sitting with the suits, debriefing with them, and of course, they give you the old thing, you know, you got a security clearance of this, this, and this. If you want to keep it and be happy and have a good life, shut up. So he just said, yeah, okay, let me go home and have a drink.
And he would be talking to which level of intelligence, do you think?
Oh, he just called in the suits.
And that the suits would be debriefing him as a Boeing engineer on problems with missiles that seemed to be directly related to unidentified flying objects that would show up over the missile silos?
Absolutely.
Do you remember any other really dramatic episode in his investigations of the missile silo problems?
Well, he told me of an instance where they were responding to a breach at a missile silo, and I believe this was in Wyoming, and a jet had been scrambled to intercept. The jet had lost contact. Well, the minute it lost contact, of course, everybody out in the field was on alert, and they were trying to locate it. When the plane was located, my father happened to arrive there shortly after several other vehicles, and the plane did not crash. He said it looked like it had actually been landed, like a pilot had landed it belly up. He said the canopy was off, and he said on just one side of the cockpit, just below where the pilot sat, he said there was about a half a dozen or more 3-inch holes right in a line. And the pilot was out of the plane and basically in a sitting position against the fuselage, and his legs were gone from just below the knees. He said the inside of the plane, underneath the pilot there, was just absolutely melted.
So his legs from the knees down had been burned off?
Exactly. My dad said there was no way he could have gotten out of that plane by himself. There was no way he could have landed that plane.
So this was like a theatrical demonstration by whatever is in the unidentified flying objects that you can come after us in your planes, but this is what we can do to retaliate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wasn't your father very curious about the non-human intelligence that was behind all of this phenomena that could interfere with our most classified technologies?
Well, he wasn't so much interested in who was doing it, but how they were doing it. He wanted to see the hardware. He wanted to see how they made it. He already knew that they were way, way beyond us.
But what did your father say was his understanding about the reason for a policy of silence that essentially was a lie, that we're not alone in the universe, and it had the capability of interfering and shutting down our most advanced technologies?
He said, if you had somebody like that, would you want to admit it? Would you want to let everybody know that you couldn't defend yourself? That's pretty much it. He knew that someday somebody was going to figure it out, somebody was going to find out, and one of these days we will see.
shutting down nuclear missiles, making sure that they couldn't work, making sure that the makers of the nuclear missiles would get a clear message, we're not going to allow you to use these, isn't that in a way indirectly saying we're not here to fight you, we're not here to hurt you. We are, in fact, trying to stop you humans from hurting each other with weapons that will destroy everything?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did he ever say to you, I don't understand why the government is keeping all of this quiet?
Yeah, he did say that because that denial, it always pissed him off. Even though working for the government all those years, he still didn't trust them.
Boeing must have a tremendous amount of information about the non-humans and their technologies measured by what they were able to do at missile silos.
Oh, undoubtedly, because Boeing was a contractor for all of the missile silos for the Beaumark and the Minuteman and the maintenance on them and everything. I mean, so whatever the Air Force knew, Boeing knew or knows. So, yeah, I can't see why Boeing doesn't have a big file, but it's probably way under lock and key.
Sounds pretty credible, Linda.
Oh, yeah. And the documents, you can see the documents on his father's life in my report at earthfiles.com. And the story about the airplane being put down, or the jet being put down on its back, and the pilot missing the legs from the knees down, it reminded me back in that January 1948 incident when there was that Captain Thomas Mantell, and he went up after a silver disc, described it as being huge, and then his plane was found in debris over quite a wide area, and some of the reports from that day were that they found holes, small holes, throughout the metal on the crash debris that they collected. And it is, to me, it raises some of these issues about how long our government has known that we're dealing with a technology that certainly can retaliate when it wants to or needs to. And the question today in 2010, is there an Earth secret war still going on? And is it possible that we're dealing with one or more intelligences that are actually very concerned about Earth life surviving, about biodiversity surviving, and that things like nuclear missiles and atomic bombs might tear into electromagnetic frequencies, other dimensions that we don't understand, and that might be why that there's been a concerted effort to stop humans blowing up atomic bombs.
Linda, dramatic story, and I'm glad it comes to you when you're on the program. You know,
yes, me too.
Calls. We'll open up the phone lines next hour and see what gives, okay? And when we come back in just a moment with Linda Moulton Howe, we'll be talking about a Texas nurse who had a close encounter with some kind of bizarre, non-human entity. What the heck was that all about? Linda's website, by the way, earthfiles.com. My email, george@coasttocoastam.com. Back in a moment with Linda Moulton Howe on Coast to Coast AM. Well, if you're not a StreamLink member, Coast Insider, you can be for just 15 cents a day. Just 15 cents a day. Just go to coasttocoastam.com and sign up and get your downloads and your podcasting. And they are going through the beta test now, folks, for the Android and the BlackBerry apps. So very soon indeed. Next hour, we'll take phone calls, conversations with Linda. But when we come back, I've got to hear about this Texas nurse who had a close run-in with a bizarre non-human. That's next on Coast to Coast AM. Linda, I've been waiting up all night for this one.
Yes, this is really something. It was a couple of weeks ago on November 6th, and I received an email from a nurse who works in a major medical center in the Dallas, Texas region. She had seen me discussing the interactions of one or more non-human intelligences with Earth life on the History Channel television series Ancient Aliens that's now in its second season. And she wrote, this is a quote, I would like to share an incident that happened to me, 47 years old, and my spouse, 58 years old, on August 19th this year. He woke up at 2:55 a.m. short of breath, and his blood pressure was elevated. Nothing new, for he has been going through some cardiac issues for some time now. Nonetheless, I snuggled up to him, reassured him that he was going to be fine, and we fell asleep. At 5 a.m., I remember waking to a strange sound with this green light coming in through the bedroom window. Again, not sure if I was dreaming or what the heck was going on. I sat up in bed and I reached over to my husband and I asked him, "What is that?" And then she briefly described coming face to face with a non-human entity. Well, I emailed back asking if I could call her to talk in more detail on or off the record. She sent her phone number with a request that I not use her name or actual location beyond the greater Dallas, Texas region. But she wanted to talk to someone who has interviewed hundreds of people in the human abduction syndrome. She agreed I could tape our conversation for use as an anonymous experiencer in Earth Files and this Radio Coast report. And here now is the Texas nurse.
It was very strange. I remember sitting up in the bed because there was a noise, like a high-pitched sound, right over our house. And then as I sat up in bed, there's this green hue, neon green glowing light. I sat up in bed and I reached over to him to wake him, and I said, "What the f*** is this?"
Right.
And I remember him sitting up, and we're both staring at the window that's near our bed, and you could see the green light, kind of coming in from the outside. Green neon. It's a weird green.
Like a chartreuse neon green?
Yes. And I'm reaching to him. He gets up, and we're both looking out the window, and I notice that he's getting up and coming into the living room because our bedroom is directly into the living room. And I'm like, "Don't leave me." And before I know it, he's gone. It's knowing him, because he's a curious person, I think that he went to open the back door to look outside. And so I'm left in the bedroom by myself. And so I go to the window reluctantly, and I pull the curtain back. And as I pull it back, this creature or being or something is staring right back at me, right at the window. So I just kind of stare at it, and my heart's racing. And I raise my hand up and say hi. As crazy as that sounds. But he just stared at me.
Now, how far is it from you on the other side of the glass?
I would say 8 inches, 9 inches away.
What are you seeing in detail?
All I see is the green light all around us. He's not green. He's not glowing. He's not green, but the green around us is green.
And what are you seeing on this creature in front of you?
Well, he is, I can tell that it's short. It's a short little man or being, because I'm only 4'10", and it's not more than an inch taller from me. He has skin. It's kind of remind me of bark from a tree, and it had big, big black eyes that kind of were narrow but wide and slanted to the size of its face, and didn't see any arms or legs, just like from the chest up is what I was seeing.
And what was the shape of the head?
It wasn't a head like ours. It was just roundish. It didn't have a chin. It didn't have ears. It was just strange.
So it's a round face, not a light bulb-shaped face.
It's not even round. This sounds crazy, but it's the only thing that comes to my head because my grandson watches it a million times a day. On SpongeBob, he's got a friend named Patrick that's a starfish, and Patrick has this round body head type. Doesn't really have a neck, doesn't really have a head, but it's there. That's the only way I can describe this thing, and it has like the tree bark skin.
Can you explain that tree bark skin more in detail?
From what I can tell, like a dark brown color. If I could have reached over to touch it, I would say it would have felt rough, scaly maybe, like reaching over and touching the bark on a tree. That's what it reminded me of.
Is there anything about that tree bark look that would be reptilian?
Like a lizard?
Lizard or a snake or an alligator or anything like that?
It's possible. To me, at the moment, I just felt like it looked like a tree bark.
Okay.
And it had a hat on. It had this, I don't know if it was a hat or it was part of his being, but it had like a flat, surgical-looking hat, and then on the brim of the hat, it had lettering or a design on it.
Do you know if that hat had color?
Green. It was a different shade of green than the green hue that I kept seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different shade of green.
What can you tell us about those eyes?
To first see it, it's scary. It was like very scary, but when you stared at it, it wasn't like a mean creature. It wasn't like someone or something that was here to do harm. It never blinked, just wide open. It was just very weird. I was scared. It scared the crap out of me.
So you were scared, but did it put thoughts in your head like, I mean you no harm?
Well, no, but I know when I waved at it and it didn't say nothing, or it just stood there and I waved and said hi, I remember in my mind, I'm telling it you shouldn't be here. And it asking me, well, why not? And I said, because people are afraid of you and they're going to shoot you.
And what kind of response did you get back from its mind?
As soon as I said that, it was like I'm in a different, I was no longer at the window. It's like, okay, I'm somewhere else now. I was now in a strange contraption. It wasn't like a bed that you're tied down. It was a metal-looking contraption, and I could move my arms. I remember being able to move my arms, but not the rest of me. And then I felt like, it was weird, like if you've ever seen a family photo album and going through every picture 100 miles an hour, that's how weird it felt.
In other words, you were having a bunch of images running through your head?
Yeah, things pertaining to me.
Like seeing images from your life?
Yeah.
And as those images ran through your mind quickly, what thoughts in your head?
Well, I remember it was a lot of sadness, and in my past there's been a lot of sadness. I don't know. And then I remember there was at one part like the metal, like a salad dong. You pull the salad out, those little fork thingies.
Oh, and it has two parts that close and open?
Yes, and I just saw the tip end, and it's crazy, but it was about to pinch my nipple. And that's when I cried, and I said, why are you doing this to me? And my thought was, I would have helped you. Just ask me what you want. Why are you doing this to me? And that's when everything changed again. And then it went to this loud, horrible, high-pitched sound in my head, and something's trying, there was a hand or something trying to get a hold of my head, and something trying to put this object in the back of my head. Every time that object touched the back of my head, I would hear that high-pitched noise and the pressure in my head. I was fighting it, and then I woke. And when I woke, I was laying in bed in like a fetal position, scared to death. I didn't want to move. I was like, was this a dream? Was it real? And as soon as I woke, my husband woke up, and he was like kind of short of breath, and I said, are you okay? And he said, I'm not sure. I'm sorry I get shaky because it makes me so nervous. Mm-hmm. But that's what he said. Well, I've had this dream that there was like the presence of two aliens behind me, and his part was that he had a string that was like a fishing line that he kept pulling and pulling from the side of his abdomen. And these beings were just behind him, watching him. And he's like, I pulled like a mile of this stuff, just pulling and pulling.
Did you ask him where did he go when he got up and went to the living room?
I did, and he says the only thing he remembers is being in the living room pulling this string up. He doesn't remember getting up out of bed. The only thing is pulling the string out. And he said that these beings, I asked him, well, what did they look like? And he said he couldn't see them. They were behind him, but he felt they were docile. Docile
meaning gentle?
Not there to harm him. For some reason, just to watch. Sorry, he's correcting me right now. One alien's behind him.
One being.
One being.
Did he ever remember seeing a craft or a room away from your house and living room?
He was so busy concentrating, he says, on that fishing line, trying to pull it out of his abdomen.
After you wake up and the two of you talk, and this was in August, not long ago, have you had any vivid dreams about this tree bark skinned creature?
No, but after that, I kept having these dreams of numbers, and I don't know why, just numbers going through my head constantly, numbers. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 37, 104, just numbers. It's crazy.
People do get mathematical information in their minds that they don't understand. And when you have had the numbers running through your head over and over in vivid dreams since the encounter with the creature, have you had any residue, any gut feeling about meaning to those numbers?
Yes, I have. I even woke up one time and I had left a pen and paper next to my bed so I could write them down when I woke up. And I did so. I wrote them down, but then the next day I thought, I'm acting like a lunatic. This is ridiculous. I tore it up and trashed it.
Oh, no.
It's always on my mind anyway.
Well, if you get a download of numbers again, write them down, and we'll see if we can find somebody who might find meaning in them.
Okay.
Do you associate the streaming numbers in your mind in these vivid dreams with the tree bark skinned creature?
Yes, I do. It has a connection to that. As time had progressed and I'm not scared and I can turn off my lights now when I go to bed, it's more like, what do they want from me? They have to want something, and I don't think they're here to hurt me for sure, or they would have done it a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I just don't know what it is. Like there is something bigger coming. I think they just want to study us. I don't know. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. They want to see what we're made of. They want to see how to reproduce. So I don't know why that comes to my mind, right. But that's what I'm thinking. But I know they're not from here. And I'm really glad that I can talk to you because I need to know, is it a dream? Was this real? It's scary, and it makes me mad, though. It's like, come on, sit down and have a cup of tea or coffee, and let's talk about what you really want. Don't come in here in the middle of the night and experiment on me or talk to me through my dreams or whatever. It makes me mad because what gives them the right to do such things? And it kind of scares me in a way. Are they so above the human race that they feel they can get away with this? Maybe they are.
And George, as I listened to her story and thought about the metaphor of his trying to pull some kind of string out of his abdomen and her having the dreams with numbers, that there have been so many cases where I've interviewed people who have been enraged by being handled by non-humans in ways that they thought were intrusive. And I'm thinking of one particular. It was in Colorado. It was Thanksgiving time in 1980, so about 30 years ago. It was a husband and wife. They were both taken up in a car in a beam of light, and they were separated. And it's a huge, complex story. But at one point, she remembered that she was very upset and very angry at what they were trying to do to examine her body. And all of a sudden, exactly as the Texas nurse described, where she was in one reality, she thought it just is a jump cut scene like in a movie. And she was in a hallway, and that the non-human beings, which were a mix of what you would call the grays, but very tall, white-skinned, a completely different type, but they are lining a hall, and she is mentally told to walk down the hall, and then the non-humans all bow to her. They're on their knees on the floor. And she said, what do they think I am? That they can sugarcoat what they're doing to me by putting me in a scene in which it's theatrical, and they are getting down on their knees and bowing to me. And I've thought a lot about that because throughout the whole human abduction syndrome, case after case, you find overlays of relatives many that have passed on will be overlaid over whatever the intelligence is. And I've come to try to broaden my mind to think if they are time travelers, if they're from another dimension, wherever the source is, another solar system in this universe, none of us know for sure, that they would have the same problem interacting with us as we would in trying to communicate, let's say, to some other life form which we have no experience with, and trying to come up with metaphors, trying to come up with theatrical demonstrations, trying to use the human mind's own templates and experiences as a way to get across some ideas that might hit the human as extremely strange, but might be the way that the non-humans are peacefully trying to find some kind of an interface in which they can communicate these complex ideas. As she felt, they aren't here to hurt us. There seems to be some kind of study, a sense that something bigger is coming. I think most people in the abduction syndrome have a sense about that. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure do.
And I'm just curious, what you interview a lot of people on Coast. What thoughts do you have thinking about what seems to be a really honest, straightforward description of a highly unusual interaction that occurred just 2 or 3 months ago?
Well, see, I have taken the position, Linda, that I think these abduction cases, if they're occurring, are being done for genetic manipulation to replace us. I think they're building an army of their own kind and a little bit of us, and one day they're going to plop them all down here on the planet and move us out. Or something moves us out, an asteroid or something, and they're getting ready to recolonize the planet for us.
What if it is the timeline issue? What if it is some form of humanity 40 to 50,000 years in the future that has hit a wall that DNA no longer replicates?
Possible.
And that they are sophisticated enough technologically that they could come back in some past looking for genetic material that would be healthier, trying to survive. And if that were the case, then this would not be so ominous as much as a survival issue for us, past, present, and future, and them, whoever the them is, past, present, and future.
Or maybe they're coming back to fix a genetic problem that affected them later.
That is a possibility that then lifts away the sort of ominous overtones that I really think are not there. I think we are in a survival story, ours and theirs.
All right, well, stick around because next hour, conversations with Linda. She'll take your phone calls. She'll take your tips as well because perhaps you have another story to share with her that she'll go and follow up on. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.